Well, I ran into an interesting article. You tell me how
Okay.
long you want to live.
All right. I want to live till I want to break the record of my family. I want to live to 105.
What is the record in your family?
103 and a half.
And who was that?
That was Wilhelmina Childs, my great grandmother. I'm very excited when I'm a grandparent that I'll be able to tell my grandchildren that I knew somebody from the 1800s.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So, Miss Childs, she was pretty healthy her entire life. Was she
Yes.
one of these
She drank gin.
centenarians?
Yeah. She got, she was always very proud. She was always mentioned on the Today Show, for the 3 years that she was alive, past 100.
Interesting.
And only at about 102 did she break her hip, and then it all went downhill very quickly. But up until then, I mean, she was driving well into her 90s.
Right. So
She went to renew her license, and they were like, whoa.
pretty impressive.
And they actually, in Dallas, you get free taxi service, or at least you used to.
I see. So, other than her winning the genetic lottery, what do you attribute her longevity to?
She was very social. She was involved with very many social clubs.
Right.
She did have a pacemaker.
Okay.
But, she was slender.
Yes.
And she just, and she always had her little bit of alcohol, brandy or gin.
Right.
But not a lot. She wasn't excessive in anything like that.
Was she physically active?
By the time I knew her, not really, but she did teach me how to play tic-tac-toe when I was 3 years old.
Right. Okay, but presumably she had been physically active for most of her life, at least walking.
Not like we think of it, no. But she was very social. She was a member of social clubs, and she did that and had her buddies and
So she had community connections.
big time. Yeah.
Okay. Her diet pretty clean overall.
No, it was back then. This is the 80s.
Real food back then.
Right.
Those elements that are at the Smithsonian that we no longer see. Broccoli with actual vitamins in them,
Right.
micronutrients, instead of just a fraction. Anyways, one last question about Miss Wilhelmina Child.
Yes.
Level of education.
She was, I believe, college educated.
Perfect. So that brings me to the point today.
Okay.
So I recently saw a statistic of people who are 25 years of age
Right.
today, 25. How long are they likely to live past 25? What is the average in the U.S.?
Probably, I would say, another 55 years.
Pretty close. So the group that has a college education lives another 58 years.
Okay.
So that's a total of 83. That's the average.
Right.
Okay? The 25-year-olds who do not have a college education, they live 49 more years on average.
Wow, that's a 9-year difference. That's huge.
9-year gap. So why the 9-year gap?
Yeah, I was going to ask, why do you think there's such a huge gap? Is it causality or is it just correlation?
So we know that level of education does have a direct impact on your choices of both nutrition and activity,
Okay.
which is why I was asking about Wilhelmina Child,
Right.
right? Having lived past the age of 100. So she was educated, from a college degree perspective,
Sure.
right? So today we have a bit of a crisis in the educational system, in my opinion, for two main reasons. One is the cost.
For two main reasons?
Two main reasons and one minor reason.
Okay.
One main reason is just the cost.
Sure, it's become exorbitant.
Right. So fewer people are enrolling in 4-year university programs, and
Especially men.
men at a lower percent of those eligible to go to university, in other words, high school graduates
Right.
or junior college individuals who want to transfer to a 4-year university, and 40% of men as opposed to 60% of women. or of the enrollees. Sorry, I didn't say it correctly. So out of 100, 60 are women and 40 are men.
Yeah, that's right.
Tremendous gap.
It used to be flipped.
Or correct, more
Yeah.
in favor of males.
Right.
And over the last, say, decade, it's gone towards more females. And that includes also the high-level STEM and academic type professions, such as the legal profession, the medical profession, and then the STEM ones, of course, engineering, physics, chemistry, biotechnology. Those, the ones that are more likely to find employment opportunities, ample employment opportunities post-graduation,
Right.
right? Not only, obviously, four-year degree recipients, but also those that continue on, like in the medical profession, correct? So the average time it takes somebody to become a family doctor is about 11 to 12 years because of the 4-year pre-med, 4-year medical school, and then a residency of 3 to 4 years. If you're a surgeon, it's 15 to 16 years. Cardiologist, same thing, 15 or so, perhaps a little longer, such as in my case, it was 17. Oh my. Anyways, so there is a correlation with the choices, lifestyle choices that people make. Less smoking,
Okay.
more
That's huge.
access to medical care because of socioeconomic status issues, more likely to afford better quality foods. And though these may be marginally more expensive, people are generally better informed about those foods and activities that promote overall physical and mental health.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay? Versus people who do not have a college degree and a 4-year, bachelor degree or more.
Right.
Traditionally, they're less likely to enter the middle class. They're less likely to be as sophisticated in terms of both nutritional choices, activity choices, and other activities that decrease stress, that promote proper sleep, and they're more likely to be smokers as well. So these, I believe, make the major impact in terms of the, longevity, and
That makes sense.
explained largely the 9-year gap. Okay, if you look by race at college-educated 4-year degree recipients, the mortality difference or the longevity is the same. It's education that makes the difference, not the race of the individual. Again, there are a couple of exceptions, people with certain congenital issues. I'm not talking about those.
Right. Sure.
Okay? In the cardiovascular world, we have a group of those. I don't want to get into the weeds of that right now. It's not the conversation.
Right.
It's got to do more with choices that you make, conscientious choices. And as you age, you continue to have the curiosity, the more educated the curiosity for maintaining health and the discipline perhaps to follow good medical advice and also at large advice.
Well, the kind of person that's got the dedication to get a college degree, you would think would have the ability to be more dedicated to follow the advice that a doctor says.
Yes, there's a certain truth to that, although now this is what is changing because the cost of the education is so large and students now are hampered with hundreds of thousands of debt
Right.
that impairs their well-being over the next 10 to 20 years post-graduation, and especially those that entered careers that promised them a false sense of security in terms of job attainment, and it did not occur.
Right.
So too many people in the humanities, unfortunately, are not getting the type of degrees that will translate into the 6-figure salary that they had envisioned or dreamed of for
Right.
themselves.
Right.
So they have the debt, they have the anxiety and depression over having to pay all those funds. And when loans became readily available, that were guaranteed by government. It was easy to give an 18-year-old hundreds of thousands of loans, and they did not understand that they had to pay them back and that eventually these would come due. And so that goes across the board for most individuals. And occasionally, if somebody is smart enough, they may go, okay, that I'm not going to take a $60,000 loan to pay a tuition at an expensive out-of-state university. Instead, I'm going to stay in an in-state junior college for 2 years, get really high grades, and then jump over to a 4-year university. So I only have the higher tuition
For 2 years.
in an in-state university, which is a lot less than it would be in an institution outside of the state where they reside, right?
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then the other factor, of course, is that the type of teaching that's going on now, unfortunately, too much of this has made it into more the right-leaning media, is ideologically based. So colleges are being branded, universities are being branded as ideologically driven rather than sticking to the course material
And how does that
on STEM.
How does that affect longevity? I'm confused.
Well, no. This affects the disillusionment with going to universities by many.
Right,
saying,
right.
I'm not going to pick an institution that is leftist, extreme leftist leaning, whose professors are, 90, 95% extreme liberal leaning and trying to push down a certain ideology on sex, gender, on various political arenas. I'm there to learn biology. I'm there to learn math. There to learn the basic building blocks so I can become an engineer.
Right.
Right? Or a physicist. I do not think science cares about ideological divides.
Sure.
Right? So it just dissuades people from attending certain institutions.
Okay.
And as of late, we now know that, it's been uncovered. I believe the Supreme Court just ruled against Harvard University and also against, University of North Carolina or South Carolina, one of the two. Please look this up, on selecting students on the basis of their race.
Sure.
And not on their
Merit.
qualifications or their merit, right? And I think Stanford University just announced that only 23% of their applicants are white, and that there's no need to write the SATs, that they're not even being considered for entry, and that the majority of the class that was just admitted for this fall semester was people of, they call them, I guess, various ethnicities because they're following the diversity, inclusivity, and what's the other letter that goes here?
It's DEI.
DEI. So what is it exactly? What does it stand for?
Give me 1 second.
Diversity, ethnicity, inclusivity. No. DEI.
I'm looking right now.
By those standards. And a lot of the universities now have inclusivity and diversity staff.
It's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Equity. So the word equity, in my humble opinion from what I have seen in the Oxford English Dictionary, unless that definition is about to be changed, as many others have been recently, stands for equal outcome.
Orwell talked about that.
Right.
Newspeak, control the dictionary and you control thought.
Correct. So there you go. A great reference to 1984.
One of the greatest books ever written.
Correct. So equity is guaranteeing equal outcome. And when the government gets involved in this, I think that it can spin out of control because we are human beings.
Right.
And human beings, what I mean by that is, are human nature is not malleable.
You don't think it's malleable?
No, I don't.
Explain.
Yeah. Well, we're self-serving. We are endowed by our biological evolutionary forces that basically promote survival of the fittest. And we, over several 100,000 years, let's say Homo sapiens has been on Earth, our current species, as we are, for roughly 200,000 years.
Right.
And
Give or take.
We
Right.
only came out of Africa, or you would say out of Greece, 60,000 years ago. Not that long ago, right? So prior to that, there were other Homo species, including the Neanderthals and, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, going back, a million years and more. So we have been a species that has killed our competitors. We're savages. Savagely aggressive. We are self-serving. Our brains have evolved to, in the same way, to crave sweets for survival advantage. Way back then it was.
Right.
No longer it is. In that same way, we have evolved to try to dominate anyone who's different from us.
I just saw a very interesting thing on this topic. Grasshoppers.
Yes.
When there is a lot of rain or a monsoon season,
Yes.
they breed like crazy, and they're solitary, sweet. They just go around munching on grass.
Right.
Then when there's a drought,
Yes.
their epigenetics changes,
Yes.
and they actually turn into locusts
Yeah.
and start eating each other like cannibals.
Exactly.
So the exact same animal that in one scenario is a sweet, kind, just keeps to itself, when the conditions change, turns into a terror that eats each other.
Correct.
So, humans in the same way, when in a time of plenty, they can be
Yes.
sweet, and then when the situation changes,
We can be brutal, right?
Right.
So it's a great analogy in the animal kingdom, and we see it in the wild still to date.
sure.
And it's the predator, or the prey. And maybe society and Judeo-Christian morality has reined that in to allow us to live in communities and societies respecting each other.
Or even like, Hinduism or Buddhism.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
where usually when you have a huge society, there is some sort of religious framework to keep people from eating each other, or else it couldn't grow to be so big. People can't live close together if they don't have a moral framework to keep themselves off of each other's backs.
Exactly. So well said. So beyond our Judeo-Christian framework, what that we are familiar with in Western societies, but the others you mentioned, of course, right? But the fact remains that is why I call it non-malleable. If we today, right now, in Dallas, Texas, we had a nuclear bomb, and there were only 2 or 3 stores open with any food, and 2 or 3 stores that had water, okay? I tell you, there'd be killings at the front of that store for those resources, for those life-sustaining foods and water availability. And let's say there was only one gas station that remained. There would be an army around it protecting that gas station.
Right.
And only certain people would be allowed to get gas for their vehicle.
Now you're talking about the plot of Mad Max.
Mad Max, yes. There is a lot of truth to that.
Right.
And that will never change in the foreseeable future. It will take thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years for the human mindset to change to that nice grasshopper you mentioned.
Right.
It just won't. So that's why I say we're not malleable. If you as a government individual think that you have the power to automatically change behavior, it won't happen. That's why you can increase the tax on sugar. You can increase the tax on cigarettes. You can increase the tax on alcohol products. Humans will still use them. You can put deterrents. And it'll continue to happen. What are we seeing in the recent crime wave that we have in many inner cities and large cities in the U.S.? If you don't prosecute criminals, what happens?
They become bolder.
Right. And the crime goes up. Violent crime goes up. And so these experiments that fall mostly on the extreme liberal margins without really proven data and label everyone else as a racist, they're completely without basis because they do not understand the basics of human nature. And human nature, in my opinion, still is controlled by hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolutionary biology. We're not different. And somebody famous once said, I think it was Bill Maher, didn't he say? At the end of the day, humans, I like humans except for that they're savages or something like that.
I didn't hear that one. Where did he say that?
He said it. I'm not paraphrasing it correctly,
Okay.
but it's the understanding that we are terrible animals. He wasn't the one that said it. He was talking about someone else who said it.
Okay.
So he was paraphrasing that one, and I'm trying to paraphrase it without using the correct terminology and words, but the meaning is the same. And so if you say you think you can achieve equity through inclusion into higher institutions when some of those people may not have had the correct opportunities at the beginning, okay? So I'm a believer in providing opportunity. Let's provide opportunity to whoever wants it. That is, to me, the basis for having better performance in the universities and being able to attain degrees that have a meaning that translate into a profession and into an employment that meets the expectations of the individuals, as opposed to falsely being led down a pathway that appears to be a bit of a scam, lending these young individuals hundreds of thousands of dollars that they will hardly be able to pay off, and then they obtain a college and or postgraduate education degree in such a narrow field that has very limited employment opportunities, perhaps for a few.
Right.
And we can cite several examples in the humanities where that occurs. But if you then tell me, okay, how do we change longevity in those that should go into more technical type degrees or into acquiring skill sets that are very useful to society? And I think in the past you brought out the example of a plumber, right?
Yeah.
Who is hard to come by in large cities. So if a pipe breaks in your building in New York, you're going to have a tough time getting a plumber in within, say, a day or two because there's such a shortage.
Sure.
And yet those individuals are not only well paid, but often finished high school. Maybe they went to a technical school, a vocational school for a year or two, and now they're making more than, say, an architect. Like my son, it cost $300,000 for 5 years at Syracuse.
Wow.
Okay. And his first job out of university, first it took him a long time because he thought he was going to be highly recruited. And despite the fact that he graduated in the upper echelon of his class, a very talented young man whom you know well.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
he's very talented and very well-spoken and all of it.
Yes, I'm very proud of his accomplishments. It took him a while, and once he did get a job, it was for I think $50,000 or $55,000 a year, living in Boston.
You're never going to pay off your student loans like that.
No, and he was lucky that he didn't have a large student loan because he had family like myself that were able to provide him with that privilege. So he was given opportunity. He only has about $30,000 in student loan out of the 300. He was quickly laid off when COVID started, and now he's designing furniture. So
Nothing to do with his degree.
no, but because he has talent. So he would have done well because of that talent, but very few have the kind of talent that he possesses.
Sure.
So most of us don't have that kind of talent. We have to grind through a career process with a vision to get us there. And this is where the fallacy lies. a lot of the professors tell them, oh, yeah, you do this, you can learn lesbian dance and be the PhD student in lesbian underwater basket weaving, and you're going to have a great degree at an Ivy League university and professorship and tenure. False. It's not true. And so now they're in debt, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, depressed, anxious, or many drop out, still
Right.
with the debt.
Right.
And no particular education other than perhaps being capable of Ubering, taxi, food, and or working at Starbucks or in some department store. And again, I have nothing against those people, but we have to relook at the educational system. Our promises being made, our promises being kept. Is it worth it? So ideological driven universities, as has been occurring, that are not providing proper education. I think at Berkeley, to be an English major now, you don't have to study Shakespeare anymore because he's racist.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you don't need to read one Shakespeare play to be an English major anymore.
That seems kind of weird.
Yeah. So why? All right. It goes along with the topic we're discussing. And so longevity really should come down to accountability to the individual. Even if you do not go to college, become well-informed on nutrition, plenty of information, great information is out there on social media and other sources from podcasts, for
Right.
example.
Sure.
In the same with physical activity and staying away from tobacco products, consumption of alcohol, 1 or 2 servings, 3-4 times a week, probably going to be fine. The French paradox demonstrates that. And being physically active every day, 30 minutes or more, and clearly, of course, consuming good quality foods by staying away from refined sugar, saturated fats, processed foods, right? So that anybody can do. Most people can do, and there's plenty of information for that.
But what we need is the people that aren't as educated to realize that.
Correct.
Right.
Right. But that is why we do the podcast. That's why this information hopefully will be scaled up and transmitted to many. So share, click and share.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Like and subscribe, click and
Yes.
share.
So I'd love to see plumbers live beyond 100. I'd love to see AC technicians live to be below.
Do you find this in
Past
your
100.
practice where the people, because obviously we're getting these statistics from national statistics, but
Yes.
you are on the front lines and you have a lot of blue collar
Yes.
people that come into your practice. Do you find the same thing?
I find that these people who are over 40 and up to 70 or 80, I see more chronic diseases because, again, we go back. They are from a system whereby lesser education meant less access to medical care, more consumption of poor quality foods, more
Right.
sedentary lifestyle, more smoking, more or at least a high percent of alcohol consumption. So the deleterious behaviors are still very prevalent in the people that are currently in my age group.
So you have to educate them, right, when
Yes.
they come in. That's like one
Yes.
of your big things, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, cognitive behavior modification to get them to see where they are, what risks they have, and try to obviously improve on those and mitigate the bad outcomes and so on. So just like in health, we don't have that equity. Okay, there's no equal outcome. I can't make a 60-year-old guy that smokes a pack a day, that is 100 pounds overweight, that has out of control diabetes, cholesterol, and hypertension, and has sleep apnea, and refuses to do anything about it, make that guy live the same as Miss Child, who was over 100 when she finally succumbed to the complications of a hip fracture because of osteoporosis and osteopenia.
Right. Well, and
Right?
and I think if she'd known about the frailty stuff that we've talked about,
Yes.
she might have even have lived longer.
Yes.
Because she didn't lift weights or anything.
Right. So more protein consumption, more vegetables and fruits are going to help the frailty
Right.
situation. And of course,
Resistance
calcium, vitamin
training.
D. Yeah,
Right.
exactly, resistance training. So the fact of the matter is that the message we're promoting here today is we're talking to 25-year-olds. We're saying, hey, where are you today? You don't have a college degree? Become well-versed in nutrition, physical activity, and lower your social media use to less than 2 hours a day, and increase your physical activity on a daily basis, 30 minutes or more, including resistance training, and better nutrition, of course.
Now, how much do you think people that aren't educated end up living in food deserts, and that might be part of the reason why they don't live as long?
Yeah, that's bullshit too. So this is another bit of a myth
Yeah.
about the food desert concept.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So
Cook,
yeah,
Fred.
Yeah. So this has been promoted by the media. Once again, I don't want to point to one side or the other. Let's just keep it generic. That the U.S. has a lot of food deserts. Fact of the matter is that we have available within a reasonable distance to most people in both rural and in urban areas, the ability to be able to obtain great quality foods. And the term was started by some college professor that wrote a paper, and it just got promoted without really any data. And there was a bias selection of one small group that was living basically mostly from fast food and or convenience store type foods.
Right.
And it got promoted because it basically met the narrative
Confirmation bias.
of the left in a confirmation bias without really truly understanding it, that this is not what is happening across the board in both Western societies, but also in developing nations. I mean, I go to Mexico several times a year. I'm in contact with people who are middle upper class, but I'm also in contact with the people that work for them.
Right.
Which, let's say, is 50-60% of the population in Mexico, which is lower middle class or lower socioeconomic status.
Right.
Well, these people, they have access to wonderful fruits and vegetables. They are often the best foods at the market and the most affordable. And they are often the ones that are widely available in their own marketplace or in the town's marketplace. Because most cities in Mexico, small and large, have a local market. And they have the most unbelievable organic products, very affordable.
Right.
Just ask the hundreds of thousands of snowbirds from Canada and the U.S. that go spend the winter in Mexico, where they go and eat. Okay? And they quickly learn that they can eat very affordably great quality foods, often much better quality than you can find in the U.S. without chemicals, without any
But what about people?
preservatives.
What about people in the U.S.?
Well, that's what I said. There are many options available that are within, say, a 10 to 20 mile radius of most community in the U.S.
Right.
Right? So the term food desert, I would say, is an overplayed term because it fits the narrative of victimhood for many communities and many people who are minorities.
Got it.
And I can go to Fiesta right now, which is where a lot of Mexicans shop, and get amazing produce, far or less costly than going to the other grocery stores.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it's not that difficult to obtain great quality foods affordably. So
it still comes down to education, though, because if you don't know about it, then right.
That's right, awareness. If you are consuming mostly what's in the middle of the grocery store, where foods are enriched with sugars and loaded with saturated fats, processed processed foods mostly, and other additives and preservatives, and that have antibiotics in them and all kinds of dyes, then you're going to suffer the consequences in your biodome and eventually in your rest of your immune system and the ability for you to fend off disease. So you're going to be more susceptible to a virus like COVID and the influenza viruses, among others, right? and develop metabolic syndrome, as we've mentioned before. So that's just ignorance.
Right. Okay.
It's not because they're a food desert. People in Mesquite, Texas, and Garland, Texas, or Kaufman, Texas, they're not living in food deserts. I don't care what the narrative says. Right? They have great food options available affordably. And it's one of the greatest things about the U.S., again, thanks to the fact that we have pretty affordable food products. I know we have an inflationary cycle right now, and these tend to be cyclical.
Sure.
And certain foods are certainly more costly. We know that right now. But overall, we have had the privilege in the U.S. of having tremendously affordable foods. And so, of high quality. So it's a question of education, understanding where and what to eat, right? Where to pick your foods and what to eat and how to prepare them. Anyways, those are the main things. So basically, if you're 25 and you want to have a healthy, long life, learn about nutrition, learn about exercise, learn about de-stressing.
Listen to Leverage the Podcast.
There you go. And let not the college degree be the major determinant of why there is a 9-year gap. That's the message. Let not your educational attainment be the major determinant of your longevity. Okay?
Yeah, and let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine thy food.
There you go. Right? So,
well,
that's it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Leverage Podcast. You can like and subscribe us here on YouTube. Be sure and hit that notification button so you can get all the newest episodes when they come out. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and many of our videos are on TikTok. We look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Till next time.